All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 25 of the Stop and Give Me 20 podcast, 20 minutes with some of the world's top fitness professionals. I'm your host, Anthony Arena. You can check out the show notes at stop20podcast.com. That's stop20podcast.com. Before you do that, make sure you go to iTunes. We get some people going on there. We actually cracked the 200 list. We're the 195th best podcast. So I appreciate any ratings and reviews. Thanks so much for being patient too. I had some internet problems, internet service provider problems. Call me for that story. All right, for today's episode, I have on Brett Bartholomew, and Brett is been on anybody that listens to the Strength Coach podcast remembers him. He's a strength and conditioning coach, consultant, and the founder of the performance and coaching consulting company called Bartholomew Strength. Talk about being all over the map. He's interned at Nebraska API. He's worked at AP Exos. He was a partner in a gym. He's worked with teams, individuals, traveled all over the world to teach and to coach. And he's officially about to become an author. Brett, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. I appreciate it. This is awesome. Awesome take on a new podcast series, and excited to be a part of it.
All right, man. Well, let's get right into it. What's that spark? What's your story? What's that early, kind of spark into your fitness lifestyle?
Yeah, the early spark was pretty straightforward. I saw my first Rocky movie and read Arnold's bodybuilding encyclopedia, and really started getting weird from there. I'll never forget the first time, I just walked into Barnes & Noble or any of those bookstores, and, you typically read all the same muscle magazines that everybody else has seen, whether it's Muscle and Fitness or Men's Fitness. And back in the day, some of those things were really, really solid. And now they're kind of, they're a little bit bloated sometimes. But then seeing Rocky, I remember, I played baseball and football growing up. And so I just felt like, all right, I need to start doing more. And when the music hit and everything else starts going in that movie in terms of the fight montage and everything, I just started committing to doing push-ups and sit-ups every night, and started going to this local gym. I was working out 2-3 days or 3 times a day. Yeah, but that was by and large the spark, is Arnold's bodybuilding encyclopedia and my first Rocky movie. Wanted to use those to get ready for sports of all things, as silly as that sounds now.
Very cool. I mean, yeah, because we've been hearing a lot of the aesthetics. I just wanted to get a little bigger. My dad got me the set, and I love that it was performance. But of course, the Rocky did inspire a lot of people. But I love that it wasn't just the Rocky; it was into the Arnold's book and the magazines. But you're right; they were much better back then. So good stuff.
No, I drive my dad nuts because I started this OCD routine of, again, how many push-ups or sit-ups I'd have to do by a certain time frame. So inevitably he'd be trying to watch Sports Center, and he'd have, a drink on the coffee table, and I'd be trying to anchor my feet under the coffee table doing sit-ups, and about every third rep would spill a little bit of his drink until eventually he'd just get pissed off and walk out of the room.
Nice. Awesome. Well, let's talk about your superhero, because it's funny. You said that, and that kind of threw me off, the Arnold thing, because I know you, as a young man, you read Boyd Epley's book, and I know you got into Ian King's book about just kind of these different people that you were influenced by. So who was your superhero growing up? Who's that person that kind of influenced you to become who you are?
Yeah, I don't know if it was really a fitness professional or anything like that. This is a bit of a weird answer and maybe a bit uncommon compared to other guests, but it genuinely was my parents, but I'm not going to say the good things about them, right? Because I think that's inherent. Everybody sees their parents in a certain light and the things they do. My parents got divorced when I was relatively young, and that's when I started really paying attention to communication. You just kind of saw how these fights would manifest, the arguments, things that would be said, things they'd try to do to work through it, how they ended up working that out into a healthier relationship, separate than they did together. So I would say that aspect of it, along with every flaky or genuine or authentic or phony person I've ever met. And, I just made notes when I was younger of who I did and did not want to be like. I mean, as early as 11, I remember doing that. I had a journal that I'd keep in my quote unquote secret drawer, which was not a secret at all. Everybody in my family knew where it was, but it was kind of like just this stash of the magazine articles or old action figures or whatever else I just wanted to kind of like hoard at the time. And I just remember like I always thought about what I wanted to be or what I didn't want to be when I grew up. And so I think everybody really in their own way has been a superhero or an influencing example in that regard.
I love that answer. First of all, they say kids of divorce or maybe alcoholics. I'm a very observant person, and a lot of alcohol in my family growing up, and lots of alcoholism, lots of a lot of stuff like that. And they say that when there's fighting or that type of stuff, you really learn to become observant because you're looking for clues and cues into somebody's mood or what they're going to be like when they enter the room, etc. So that's an interesting answer. Awesome. What about now? I mean, you're exposed. I say this to a lot of our guests because our guests are exposed to so many great people. But you've been around the block at a young age, even, and you've done a lot of stuff, a lot of traveling. You've been exposed to a lot of great leaders. Who right now are you looking up to, kind of doing some great things that you feel like is a superhero to you now?
You know who I love, and for a variety of reasons, is I'm a huge Dan Baker fan out in Australia. And Dan is just one of those guys that, here's the reason, right? Because it's easy and probably a bit trite, albeit true, to be like, oh, Richard Branson or Elon Musk or, even to a degree, Mike Boyle, because all the things he's done in our industry, right? If you wanted to make it industry specific, but I always try to find people that are a bit more on the outskirts or relatively like unsung heroes, so to speak, because those are usually some tremendous influencers. They might not have just invested in the bandwidth or had certain platforms. But when I look at what I want to be when I'm, older down the road, is I want to be somebody that's known for being damn good at what I do, but also still living one hell of an uncommon life. And so you look at a guy like Dan Baker, who has a phenomenal sense of humor, has authored over 20 research journals, but still just like goes away with him and his wife and his daughter, and they go surfing in Bali, and they just live life. And the guy's unapologetic. He's always himself. And you know what? You can't fault him for that. It was much of the same stuff that initially drew me to Dan John, and still gives me a tremendous respect for him, is these people don't try to be anything they're not. And I think being from the Midwest, that's always really resonated with me. There's no facade. There's no kind of image or brand. If they do have a brand, the brand is authentically them. And so I think Dan Baker is the one I would put up there right now. I love the guy, and I love how he lives his life.
Love him too. I had him on the podcast a long time ago, and he you talk about, doing things their own way. So I call him on Skype, and basically he's got the video on. He's on his couch, and he's got just like a tank top on. He's just chilling on the couch and
doesn't care.
Yeah,
loves it.
He's awesome. And
I think, that was something that I learned from when I was in the hospital in high school, something I talk about in my book in depth. That I think that's what that gave me that relatively early as well, is, I came relatively close to losing my life, and you kind of just get an idea in your head of like what really matters and what do I really care about. And that's tough, like today, where people always have to worry about, was that the right social media post, or, oh man, I didn't run a great session, I could have done better on that. There's so many things to be insecure about now that you really just kind of toss them out the window, because when all of us are on our deathbed, none of that stuff's going to matter.
Absolutely. Good stuff. You've coached a lot of different teams and individuals, and again, all over. You've been a teacher. You got the book coming out, Conscious Coaching. Who are you trying to be a superhero to? Who are you trying to help with your message?
Coaches. Coaches have far more value and even bandwidth than they think. And especially many of them are scared to take advantage of risk-taking, idea sharing, connecting with others outside of the craft. I mean, they'll do so by reading their books, but I don't think they ever think, what more could I do? For example, that was a big thing that drove me towards the consulting route. I always had great conversations with people. You meet so many different interesting people from around the world, whether in the team, the private sector, strength and conditioning, fitness, or what have you. And I just realized that, why don't I make this part of a business? And there's something to be said for definitely giving up your time and And, it's not like anybody that calls me, gets charged a rate. It'll never be like that. But what I did learn is there's people that will pay for advice or a second set of eyes. And if there wasn't, authors and editors wouldn't exist. If there wasn't, right, psychologists, psychiatrists wouldn't exist. Neither would doctors, for nobody to get a second opinion. So, I just think that coaches have gotten this, whether it's fitness or strength and conditioning, have gotten this pigeonhole of this idea of the grind. And if they're not doing 7 to 10 groups a day every single day, then they're not being true to the field. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody that wants to coach anywhere from 3 to 6 groups a day and still go spread and speak. Stu McMillan and Altus, from Altus and I were talking about this. He's gone and spoken for Deloitte. And I think that's great. That's something I want to do. Coaching athletes is always going to be primary and the bedrock and the foundation of who I am. But I also enjoy speaking with corporations and different people from all over the world. So I just think coaches need to our industry needs to grow up a little bit and know that they can have a bigger impact and bandwidth than they think. And I mean grow up in a good way. They just need to understand that you're not going to be outcasted for spreading your wings a little bit.
And I think we're seeing that too. I think, going to your message, if anybody that follows you on social media, your message resonates with a lot of coaches, I think. And that's why I think the book is perfect timing. Instead of, hey, Brett, you should write a book. And then 2 years later, now you got to, the book's going to come out. But, it really is. I think it's a great tipping point for conscious coaching to come out. Where do you feel like we're doing some really good things in this industry that you kind of want to keep pointing those coaches into?
Yeah, well, definitely, as you alluded to, Anthony, we're becoming better businessmen. And again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that people have to provide for their family. And when people get in certain situations is usually when they realize that, right? Like it's usually the team guy. He may have been somewhere 10, 15 years, but only when he gets fired and then finds it to be a relatively tough job market does he understand that branding and connecting is actually pretty important. Or even on the private side, right? Like love Exos, but we were pretty limited in bandwidth there, aside from if you were in certain education positions, and that's great, right? You have to give back to the company because they give you a powerful platform, and you have to respect that. But also, if you want to make a bigger difference in the industry, you kind of have to branch out at some point. So I think, becoming better businessmen, understanding our value, we just got to go get it. We got to be better at that. And then also, I think we're better at measuring objective outcomes. I think by and large, we're starting to see a bit more of a removal of coaches that just do things because that's the way they do them. I mean, people now, unfortunately, argue about what type of technology you have, when in reality, we should be grateful that technology is becoming more affordable and accessible, and we're getting better outcomes because of it and becoming more objective based because of it.
Good stuff. I want to go into books with you really quick before we get to the Stop and Give Me Five, because I heard you on, I think, Zach Evanesh's podcast, and you were talking about Boyd Epley's book. And then you were on Kevin Larrabee's, and you were talking about Ian King. And, on this, you're talking about Arnold's book. What do you think is that book that really kind of influenced you the most as a young man?
Yeah, I'd have to say it was Ian King's. Right, definitely Ian King's. That book was. I just remember at such a young age, that was my first real foray into how unique and how intricate the physiology, and the book is the book of muscle, our physiology is. And this was well before I had taken a course in even high school or college. It was unique, right? You're looking at pennation angles. You're learning about all the unique aspects of what goes on in the neuromuscular system. And that almost turned me into a Rain Man, where, I'd go up into my room at night and I'd have 3 binders of different like strength training types of articles or information. And I just siphon through different kinds of magazines, almost like I do, or any of us do now with research articles. And I laminate them and put them in there for easy reference. And Ian King's book, The Book of Muscle, just really hooked me on the physiology and how beautiful and complex that was. Very cool.
Give us a book you've read recently, maybe 6 months. I know you've been so busy, but like what's a good book that you really want to talk about right now, recommend?
Yeah, I shared this at the NSCA Coaches Conference, and I got some really weird looks, but it's honest. The Wisdom of Psychopaths. So the Wisdom of Psychopaths basically alludes to the fact that there's an upside to our dark side. And more specifically, what I mean by that is, this notion that we should try to remove, alter, or ignore, negative emotions or certain traits that we have in order to be effective leaders is an absolute lie. And so, the book talks about different traits, and there's another book called The Upside to Your Dark Side that deals with this as well, that just says things like Machiavellianism, narcissism, all those kinds of things are not only good sometimes, but they're actually inherent in some of the best leaders in human history of all time. So Teddy Roosevelt is an exact example that the book, The Upside to the Dark Side, gives you. And I talk about this in depth in a presentation that I give now. I'm actually giving it this weekend and in my book, because it made me go into researching what's called the dark triad and all these just dark-sided traits of leadership, which is in social science research. I was astounded at how much research is on this stuff. But the wisdom of psychopaths and just learning how these tendencies and behaviors that most would scoff upon can actually be leveraged to be very, very useful and beneficial, not just for you, for people that we work with.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, that's awesome. Adding that to the list. All right, Brett, now it's time for the Stop and Give Me 5 segment. 5 rapid-fire questions and answers. You ready to go?
Yep, let's rock.
All right. Well, one person, I know you've had some fighting experience and even coaching some UFC guys. One person you would never want to fight, has to be a real person. Somebody just scares you. Who would you never want to fight?
Yeah, easily Chuck Liddell. And I say that because I had the chance to work with him when I was out here in LA. That dude is every bit the size you imagine. And no matter retired or not, that he would just absolutely thump you. I mean, He tried teaching me a move or two, and I'm fine being uncomfortable and put in certain positions. But that man is touched with a different kind of gift. Wouldn't want to fight Chuck Liddell.
Nice. All right. Desert Island. Perform Better is flying in a speaker. Anybody, living or dead. Who's somebody who you'd really want to see?
Yeah, living or dead. The or dead thing's tough, but since this is like off the top of your head, honest, straightforward, again, I'd still go with Dan Baker just because the dude is absolutely entertaining to watch speak. I love his information. He's a character. He's authentic. In order to consider dead or alive, I'd have to think about that a bit more, but I want to give you the honest answer off the top of my head. So love seeing Dan speak. I always go to his stuff.
Good stuff. Done a lot of teaching. What's been your best teaching experience ever?
Yeah, by far. I went to Norway to teach a mentorship when I was in Exos, and we were supposed to have a ton of space, of course, which didn't end up happening. I was supposed to have a translator, of course, which didn't happen. I was supposed to have all these tools. Just basically, you were supposed to have everything that you needed. And it was only supposed to be about 25 folks in it. It ended up being a fraction of the space we needed. 50 Norwegians, many of which who, despite how many of them do speak English, many of which in this circumstance did not, barely had any of the equipment. And then right next to us, this some fitness convention was setting up a stage and trying to kick us off. And I basically just said, screw it. And I'm only 5'8", right? So a lot of these guys couldn't see me. I was like, they're not going to be able to understand me. I can't understand them. I jumped on the stage, basically told the people setting up to piss off and give me 20 minutes. And I just used every kind of demonstrative ability and, just body or nonverbal gesture that I could to basically teach a multi-directional session to these 50 Norwegians with absolutely no help. And that just, that's coaching to a T to me, is just being able to adapt and say, screw it, let's roll.
Love it. Wish they videotaped that. All right. Lunch with someone no longer living. So you do got to pick someone no longer living. Yep.
One or two. It would either be Frank Sinatra or Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, I love it. Sinatra. That's a good one. I didn't even think about him. Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd have to, if I said drink with somebody, it would be Frank.
No. I drink with Dean Martin. I'd talk to Frank Sinatra.
There you go. Good call. You can pick one place to work out anywhere in the world, any trainer, living or dead. What gym, and who's that trainer that's going to train you?
Gleason's gym. It would have been Mike Tyson's old trainer, Customato.
Very cool. Great answer. Let's get into the project. You're probably not specifically working on it right now. It's ready for print in March. But what's the project that you're working on that's getting you really excited?
Yeah, thanks. The project is my book. It's called Conscious Coaching. It's been about I would say from root to the fruit, 3 years in the making. It started off with some presentations I did on psychosocial elements of influence and how there's really more of a science to the art of coaching than anybody likes to give credit to. They usually pass it off as a distinctive, an art or a soft science, but really dove deep into the psychosocial literature for this. Tried to mix it with really, not only stories, but 15 other people in the field, everybody from our mutual friend Dave Paloka to David Joyce to Kyle Holland, Victor Hall. I mean, I chose 15 people to basically contribute on one aspect of the book. And the book dives deep basically into the essence of human nature meets the art of coaching and how better understanding the nuances of our behavior, our perception, and what influences us and drives us can lead us all to get more effective buy-in from our athletes and anybody that we work with. So really diving deep into the science, giving a ton of tools, a ton of strategies. So it's not a motivational book. It's not inspirational. It's not that. It's something that literally, hopefully, coaches will give right alongside with super training or science and practice to Zatsiorsky whenever they have staff come on board, interns, or even themselves.
Great stuff. And I'm going to have links to all this stuff, but the book comes out, am I correct, March 11th, right?
Yep, March 11th. Yeah, it comes out.
They can get a sample of the book on, what is the link, just so off the top of my head?
Yeah, if you just type in consciouscoachingbook.com, it'll take you right there. Or you can access it through my website, bartholomewstrength.com. But consciouscoachingbook.com is going to take you to the direct link of the book. You can also find it in the bio of my Instagram or Twitter in case the link for some reason doesn't work or you don't want to deal with typing it in.
Cool. Well, we're going to get you on the Strength Coach podcast like next week sometime. So we're going to talk all about that book. Good stuff. Brett, let's finish up last 30 seconds, 45 seconds. What's the letter to your younger self? Kind of what's that advice you'd want to give younger Brett?
Pay little mind to those that don't take risks and that don't eat their own cooking. I just think that, you have to make, in that essence, you have to make your circle as small as a period because there's too many people out there that want to share ideas and best practices and all this stuff. And they either don't do them themselves, they don't put themselves out there, or they just, they've never taken a risk in their life. So it might be valuable, but it certainly doesn't hold as much value as somebody that's really gone out there and done that on the front lines.
Good stuff. Well, I personally am really looking forward to the book coming out. Been waiting, loved when you were on some of the Art of Coaching segments on the Strength Coach podcast, and I've really been looking forward to getting you back on the Strength Coach podcast, and glad you were able to do this. So thanks so much for coming on today.
No, thank you. This is an awesome show. I appreciate it. It's nice to have the variety.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 25 of the Stop and Give Me 20 podcast. Thanks again to Brett Bartholomew. Make sure you check out all the links to all his stuff, including his book at stop20podcast.com. Don't forget, subscribe to the show, leave us a review and a rating. It's really going to help us out. My name's Anthony Renna. Thanks so much for stopping by.